All right. Well, you're just joining us here. My archive crashed earlier, so we're going to pick it up at this point. And by introducing our game for week one here, which is called 2D Platformer. And I want to set this up to loop. And 2D Platformer is a game made by Unity Technologies. I'll even actually should start here. It says powered by Unity. All of our games this week are built in the Unity game engine. And the Unity game engine is used to build games, a lot of probably mostly on mobile games, iOS and Android games. If you play a lot of mobile games, you've probably played a game that's built in the Unity engine. Sometimes you will see this logo pop up somewhere. And the Unity game engine is free to download and check out, and you could get access to all of these games and see how they're actually built and how they work. And our game is created by Unity Technologies just to kind of show off and demo their software and their game engine. So, 2D platformer. It is called 2D platform because it is a two-dimensional game, and it is in the genre of a platform game. And platform games are kind of have their history in Super Mario Brothers and Donkey Kong and Metroid, where they are the main point is to run and jump from different platforms, and maybe you shoot or punch or something like that as enemies come attacking you. So this game specifically has a fun, ridiculous concept where you are. This is London, and London has been attacked by aliens. So you are on the London Bridge, and it has fallen down. You can see that here's Big Ben over here in the London Eye that has been destroyed by the alien invasion. And for some reason, you are a bean with a top hat and a mustache and a monocle with a bazooka, and you are there to save the day from this alien invasion. So we are going to write the music for this in all of its silly kind of musical style. So this game is probably meant for maybe a mobile device. It is probably all ages or family friendly. And we are going to talk about how the music is actually set up and works in this game. So one important thing to use, let's see, when you download this assignment, you get this video, you get a copy of the game, you also get a grade sheet PDF, and what else? You will get the design document. And so, design document has a lot of information. Most of this stuff is what I will be sharing with you as we discuss the game. But down here, we'll kind of go back through this. But here is the asset list. And the asset list is an important list of all of the sounds that you will be creating and how they are actually formatted. So, the final result for this game is you will deliver a series of 9 audio files. Those 9 audio files are 3 groups of 3 files. We have 3 intros, intro 1, 2, and 3. We have 3 main loops, main loop 1, 2, and 3, and we have 3 endings. The intro and the ending cues, or these are individual WAV files. I refer to the WAV files as cues because those are how they are actually set up in the game. A cue could actually represent more than one WAV file. But for our purposes, it'll just be kind of a one-to-one relationship. So we have our intro cues. Those are 2 bars long. Our main loop cues, those are each going to be 8 bars long. And the ending cues are also going to be 2 bars long. The sample rate, 44.1, 16-bit stereo files, very common format. And whether the files loop or not. Notice that the 3 main loop files, those are going to loop. The intros and the endings are only going to play through one time. So the way that this game works, let's go back here. When the game starts and Mr. Bean here falls to the ground, the intro cue starts playing. It chooses one of the three. It just randomly chooses 1, 2, or 3 and will play that particular cue. That cue is 2 bars long, and it will play through to the ending, which is, I don't know, somewhere depends on how fast or slow your music is, but it'd be somewhere 2 bars later. And then the game, most of the music soundtrack that you will be hearing while the game is being played are the main loops. So after the first 2-bar intro plays, then it randomly chooses one of the main loops. Maybe it'll choose 3. It will play through the 8 bars of your music until it reaches the end. When it reaches the end, it can randomly choose any of the 3 again. It could go to number 1, it could go to number 2, or it could return and play it the same one again and go to main loop 3. And this will continue on and on for the entire gameplay until you either run out of health or you fall into the toxic sludge down here below. There's kind of a gap. Where is it? There's a gap down there. And you can fall into the sludge down here, and it will immediately switch and play one of the 3 ending cues. So let's wait here for just a second. There's also bombs and health pickups. To give you more health, or the bombs, you can lay the bombs down and explode a couple of aliens there. And eventually, right about here, I think, boom. As soon as you run out of health and you kind of fall down below, it's immediately going to switch over to one of the 3 ending cues. You don't know where you are, which main loop is playing, whether it's going to be on time or in tempo or on beat or anything like that. It will just hard cut. It will immediately switch over to one of the 3 ending cues, which is just fine because the game is also stopped. You lost control, and it just immediately switches over to the next piece of music. Hold on a sec. Got to get logic loaded up. Or actually, it's loading up Contact. Hold on. How about this one? What? All right, try again. There we go. All right, so we have some examples to listen to, and some more things to point out. So we have 3 main loops here. Those are each 8 bars. 3 endings here. Those are each 2 bars. Actually, these are 3 endings. And these are 3 intros. Now, I should point out that these are 4 students. These are 4 individual student projects. So let me probably make that a little bit clearer by doing that and saying this is one project. Actually, those are all muted. No. All right. So 3 intros. Intro 1, 2, and 3. 3 main loops. These are each 8 bars long. And 3 endings here. Notice with the endings that they should head towards a stop or an ending. So, we're going to start out listening here to the main loop, just so we can get a feel for how it sounds overall. Now, I guess I should point out the overall style and the musical approach. Each one of these main loops are going to feel like they come from the same song. So they shouldn't be three different, like you shouldn't have different drum kits and different synths and different tempos and keys. They should all have the same tempo. They should be in the same key. They should use the same instrumentation. It's three different parts of the same song. Each one of the 8 bars needs to extend across the entire file, and so that it loops. The game is going to be able to loop each one of these files if necessary. So you want to make sure that there's no gaps or pops or clicks or fades or anything odd in the file. The entire stereo mix needs to be in the file, so there needs to be instrumentation of at least drums, bass, harmony, and melody. You shouldn't necessarily just have 4 instruments. There should be, well, drums would be more like a full kit. Your bass would probably be a single instrument. Your harmony could be 2 or 3 instrument layers. Your melody would probably be a lead instrument line. So you want to make sure that you have consistent instrumentation, and then your melody is probably going to give you the most distinction from one cue to the next. You should have other slight changes in your percussion, your bass line, your chord progression. It shouldn't just be a repetitive loop going through the same thing on main loops 1, 2, and 3. The file itself is going to loop, so don't give me 4 2-bar loops in the span of 8 bars. Or don't repeat the same idea in the first 4 bars and the second 4 bars, where you give me 2 4-bar loops in the space of 8 bars. So watch out for repetition. Your instrumentation is up to you. The genre is up to you. It is kind of a wacky, silly, there's maybe a little bit of a British kind of feel to it, or there's Alien, so you could go into sort of an alien sci-fi kind of aspect, but it can be any sort of genre. It can be live instrumentation, it can be synths, it could be other whatever your chosen style can be. I will introduce the other game projects, and so week 2 game will be more of an electronic or more of a modern music production style. Week 3 is entirely orchestral instrumentation. So you want to consider the other game projects while you are building the music and kind of thinking about the music for this one. So here is main loop 1. Let me bring up, make sure it's not too loud. Oh no. What's going on here? Okay, sorry. I lost my audio there for a sec. All right. So let's make sure we can all hear this. Wow, what is going on? Now that crashed. Hold on, archive. All right, so let's go ahead and take a listen to these main loops here. 3 8-bar loops, 3 different variations of the same idea. Listen for the loop. So we got tuba, some brass, the marimba, the drums. Now, when it reaches the end of main loop 1, it could either play it again, it could go on to main loop 2, or it could go to main loop 3. Here's the second one. Notice that there's some change. Progression is the same, melody changes, a little change to the drums. Let's go to loop 3. Alright, changes to the progression. Each one of those is a solid variation on a similar idea, similar instrumentation, the same key, the same tempo, and it allows us to jump around to any of these so that they make sense. We should probably start in a similar place, maybe resolve back to tonic at the beginning of each one of these cues, so it makes it a little easier when you end from one of these cues to jump into the next one. Of course, the game would do that as seamlessly as possible. That's why you need to make sure that there's no gaps, there's no fades, the music goes right up against the front. Here are 3 intros. The intros need to rise and build and create a sense of anticipation or rising intensity right before it drops into the main loop. Right, intro 1, intro 2. Now watch out for things like this cymbal crash at the end. It gets cut off when the file ends. So you have to make sure that things like this have enough time to decay out and to finish before they get cut off going into the next cue. So generally what the game is doing is when the game starts, it randomly chooses one of these cues. Let me just make a copy of this. And then it randomly chooses one of the main loops. And then it randomly chooses another one. And maybe it plays that one again. Of course, this would all be perfectly lined up together. Oops. Like that. So the thing that you are listening for, when you're creating everything, is consistency from one cue to the next. The intros build into the main loops, and the endings need to resolve everything. Here is ending 1. Nope, that's main loop. Let's try that again. Notice these are all getting cut off at the end. You want to make sure that you give enough room to have the tail decay all the way to silence. All right, let's go ahead and check out another variation. Another submission here. Let's do, actually, let's do this one. This one has a more electronic approach, more synthesis than sampled instrumentation. What am I doing here? Let's do this. Let's hide those. And here's main loop 1. Let's zoom in here a little bit. So we have a strong lead line. We have some exciting drums. Let's go see how it loops seamlessly. See how it transitions into main loop 2. Change in the pattern, change in the progression. Is a little squashed and cut off at the top. Leave room for some dynamics there. Alright, so again, similar instrumentation, but compositional changes from one cue to the next. Here are 3 intros. These intros, they don't really sound too much like intros. They don't rise and kind of build that sense of anticipation. It really feels like a 2-bar loop that just kind of goes around. Feels very constant all the way through, doesn't really feel like it rises. Let's go to this one. Same thing. This one has a little snare roll at the end that helps a little bit. Actually, no, not this one. So make sure you use all of the instrument layers to, to create that rise from the intro cue. Here are 3 endings. Notice that all 3 endings kind of resolve nicely towards silence. About a bar of music, and then some time to fade out. All right, so you basically have the shape of the build from the intro, the main loops that are 8-bar loops that are consistently switching between all 3 variations, and the 3 endings that resolve and end everything. So that's most of everything that I wanted to point out with 2D Platformer. There is a couple things from the PDFs. Suggestions for composition. Make sure you compose interesting loops. Looping does not mean repetitive. This is one of the biggest issues that I get from the compositions, is that it's a repeating melody that doesn't develop. It's again, it's a 2-bar loop that just repeats 4 times instead of an 8-bar musical phrase. Transitions, you want to make sure that it's consistent, moving from intros to main loops to endings, so the instrumentation changes smoothly. There's nothing that gets cut off. There is strong changes in variations from one cue to the next, but there's nothing that makes it feel or interrupts the transitions from each cue. Keep the same tempo. That will help maintain consistency through the cues. That goes for the same key. Make continuous loops. Again, no gaps, pops, fades, clicks, nothing to kind of hint that the loop has started over again. And the overall mix, you want to make sure that you have a strong level. You want to make sure you don't completely overload or clip or distort, but you also don't want to make it too low that it can't be heard against all the other sound effects in the game. Putting your music in the game. When you have completed your music and set everything up and bounce them correctly, you can actually check them out and how they work in the game. So let me do that. When you download the assignments, you have access to the actual game application. Here is 2D Platformer, or somewhere is 2D Platformer. Try that. And to do this, you need to access the music folder inside of the application. So you can right-click and do Show Package Contents, which shows all of the files contained in this application folder, or application package. There's a folder in there called Contents. Inside of Contents, you're going to find Data, and inside of Data, you're going to find Streaming Assets. When you go into Streaming Assets, you will find Music and Sound Effects, 2 folders that you should be pretty comfortable with. Inside of music, you can dump all of your files. They need to be named and formatted exactly according to the asset list. So they need to look like this. The game, if your files do not work in the game and they are in the correct folder, then check the formatting of everything. Check that the file name is exactly correct. Check the sample rate, check the bit depth, make sure that they are stereo files. The game is actually kind of stupid. It doesn't know what you meant when you misspelled it, or you didn't capitalize something, or you didn't put an underscore, and it's just not going to work. Raul, if you're having issues, go ahead and send me a copy of your files, and I will take a look at them. But most of the time, it is some formatting issue. Just double check the file names, the formatting of all the files, and not just what you bounced out, but actually go look at the files. You can't do this in the actual application. You have to kind of drag this off to your... if you don't have the endings yet, it may not work. I don't know if it wouldn't work if you didn't have all the files. But when you drag out one of these files to your desktop, it says the sample rate. I guess I should do this. Go to Get Info. When you do Get Info, you can see the sample rate, the bit depth, the number of channels to make sure that it is formatted correctly. And maybe it doesn't work if you don't have all 9 files. Double check all of that stuff and see, and send me a copy of the files, and I can also take a look at them and test them out on my side and see if I'm having the same issue. All right, so that is 2D platformer. Get rid of that. Go back to this. Hello. Go back to this. Okay, maybe not. Go back to this. There we go. The rest of your games. Next week, you will be working on a game called Angry Bots. Angry Bots is a third-person shooter. It represents a lot of popular games out there where you're kind of shooting and battling enemies. This one, you are infiltrating a robot factory, and the robots don't like that too much, so they are attacking you. We'll be creating a couple of different pieces of music for different parts of the game. We will be talking about ambient and action, which is kind of like wandering around and exploring, and then actually in the battle, the music can shift quite often between those two states. And so each robot will have its own piece of action music while you are actually battling that robot. So we'll talk about how the music works there. Again, this is going to have a much more modern musical approach. It's a dark and gritty kind of game. Robots chasing you around, shooting lasers at you, and missiles and explosions, and all sorts of fun and interesting music and sound design. So it's going to be much more aggressive kind of music style, electronic music, or orchestral music, or sort of an epic metal soundtrack, whatever it is. Watch out for that game in week 2, and then in week 3 we throw away all of the synths and samplers, the plugin. Well, I guess not plugins, but all of the electronic music sources, and go to strictly acoustic orchestral instrumentation for the Palace of Renthalion composition. This one mimics an open world fantasy type of game where the player can go off in lots of different directions and approach the music in lots of different ways. So that gives you an idea of how the music is going to work in the game. What else? I think that will describe all of our game compositions for the month. We also have a production technique and a technical assignment. Your production technique this week will be building looping music for the game, and a couple of different approaches for creating loops. I'm actually going to be sending out the archive from last month, and I go through that process in detail. So I think I will leave that because we're kind of running out of time here. I'll leave that up for the archive with a discussion of that. And your technical assignment will be bouncing out the files in multiple different formats. This is very common for games where you create one set of music and then you build it and bounce it out in multiple different formats to work on different platforms. So, meaning that you will provide a client with maybe a high resolution version of the music. So it could be 24-bit 96K or 2448, or all of our games you will deliver 16-bit 44.1 files. For the technical assignment, you will also be creating lower resolutions of all of those files. So for the main game composition, you will create and bounce out the high resolution of the files, the ones that will actually be in the game. Then for your technical assignment, you will also be bouncing files out in 16-bit 22K stereo format. These are WAV files, and that's a pretty straightforward approach to building and bouncing out your files. It's just a lower sample rate. But you will also be bouncing out core audio files. These are 8-bit 22K mono files. And core audio files are the format of your Apple loops, and they are also the main audio format for iOS devices. Or it's a very efficient audio file format for iOS specifically. So maybe if you are also making this 2D platformer game for an iOS device, then you would probably bounce it out in a lower resolution, or it could be in a core audio file. So there's also a discussion of this assignment in the archive, and there is where is it? A production workflow. Actually, this is for your production technique. This is for looping files in Logic. There's a step-by-step process of screenshots and how to bounce and format things for this assignment. For your production technique, and then for your technical assignment, there's another one that is step-by-step of bouncing files, how to bounce 16-bit 22K stereo files in Logic, and then also how to bounce 8-bit 22K mono core audio files. The main thing here to watch out for is you have to choose the BNC E button, this bounce button from the output channel, to bounce out mono. You do not use file bounce. This is a big issue that people have with bouncing out their files. You do not use file bounce. Use this BNC E button to bounce out mono files. So follow the steps of the workflow and follow the archive, and you will get the steps to work your way through the assignment. So, question. We have one here in the chat. It's been sitting here. Let me get to it. For this week's game, would you recommend we write in major or minor? Both seem to work. Well, yeah, I mean, if it were in a minor key, that would be maybe more towards you could kind of go more towards the creepy sci-fi aspect, but major would also work very well because that goes towards the silliness, happy-go-lucky kind of all ages appropriate kind of music. Poe, much. Thank you. I appreciate it. So major or minor works. The only thing that you don't want to do for this one is switch back and forth. Sometimes in our later projects, going from a major to a relative minor works just fine. But in this one, it's best to keep to one or the other. Raul, so should I check if the problem? Should I check if the problem is not having the endings? Yes, yes, Raul. Go ahead and build those in. See if you continue to have the issue. Also, in the meantime, before that happens, you can send me your files, and I'll take a look at them on my side and see if there's anything else that is happening that I might notice. So that's always the best way. If you're having any sort of issues, send me a link with your files and I can check them out over here. Let's see. That should be enough for me. I want to wrap this up before my computer explodes. I really don't know what the issue is. It's a pretty new computer, and I haven't had this kind of 3 in a row kind of crashes here. So I'm going to turn my computer off and let it cool down a little bit. But other than that, yes, find me on iChat, send me an email, if you have any questions. On Friday, we will start a discussion of game teams and how Music Composer kind of fits into that game team. So I'll stick around if you have any questions. But other than that, have a good afternoon, and I will see you on Friday. Thanks a lot.